Hey there, thanks for joining us at the Rabbit Hole of Research, where you'll learn a few facts that you can impress your friends with at a party.
Okay, I was curious if you had ever heard of this guy, Lester Gaba.
No, I've never heard of Lester Gaba. Who's that?
Lester Gaba, he used to, he created this lifelike mannequin, and he took it around with him to different, like, he was like the high society social guy, and he took this this mannequin made of paper mache, iron, wood, and wax. No, that's what they used to be, and he took them and made them more lifelike. And he took this companion,
like silicone, or he just kind of, how do you make it more lifelike? It seems like a 80s movie.
No, he used plaster more.
Plaster. Is this like the plot to the 80s movies? What was it with Cynthia? No, what was her name?
Oh yeah, Mannequin.
Mannequin, wasn't it? Mannequin, right?
And what was the guy? He was Andrew McCarthy.
I don't know. Yeah, and then
was it Andrew McCarthy?
She came to life, right? She was like a real,
right?
Because he was like lonely, and like, did he work at the store? Or did he just like break in?
Who?
This
guy, Lester?
No, not Lester. The movie plot.
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah,
I think he worked there.
He worked
there,
and he just found this mannequin attractive. I'm trying to think of the movie. It's been some time since I've seen it. Maybe
it's been a long time.
Right,
I kind of remember. Wasn't like they're riding on like a motorcycle and she was in the back.
And did she turn back into, like, was it like Toy Story when other people came?
She really turned human? We gotta watch that movie.
Did she turn human? Kind of like, was it Splash, or was the one where the mermaid turned?
Splash, she was always alive. She just changed.
Oh, right. At the end, though, she became human.
She had like legs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
No, but the whole thing about this Lester Gaba, he went to like the most fanciest places, and they wanted her to be coming around. And she was 100-pound figure. He just would carry her around in these fancy gowns,
like a sack of potatoes on his shoulder.
I don't know how he carried her in. Or I would love to find out.
Or like a baby. I mean, can you imagine that? You're sitting at the restaurant, some dude comes in with like a mannequin in a dress.
I mean, Gaba's remarkably lifelike plaster figures were made in the image of real people, although not real famous people. But that doesn't make no sense. No. Yeah. Anyway.
So they look like there was more than one mannequin he had, so he would show up.
But then there was one, and her name was Cynthia, and then she was created for Saks Fifth Avenue. And her eerie, almost human quality caught this guy by surprise.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Even though he created her.
And it was his mannequin.
Yeah.
So he was walking along.
Yeah. And then
that was his...
he had a duplicate made, took it home, and then she was so like, oh, this famous person was so enchanted by her, she invited the mannequin to the opening of a new salon. Right?
Who invited them? I mean, how do you invite a
mannequin?
This high
society person was so taken by this mannequin.
The Lester guy, he goes, wow, I'm going to invite that mannequin.
No, Lester's the one that made her.
And then someone else was like, oh, can you
She is
bring
so
your
enchanting.
mannequin?
Can you bring her to my opening? Kind of like a big fancy art opening.
That's some lively conversation. If your baseline conversation at the party is, we need to bring a mannequin in to liven it up.
No, but I don't think it was like, the idea wasn't, let's bring in a mannequin. It was this specific mannequin that was so enchanting. What kind of
party is that? I mean,
but it was like this high society thing.
Yeah,
okay?
I mean, that's pretty lame. Then I mean, that's your friend
so
base is low.
She became the topic of all these like society columns. Like, where was Cynthia seen last? Right.
So it was like that thing with the flat man. Was it cardboard man that the kid
flat
you know, but you go around and you take pictures of Flat Stanley.
Oh,
wasn't it Flat Stanley?
Yeah, but I didn't know you were supposed to take pictures.
Yeah, like where you go.
Where did he end up?
Yeah, or that gnome. Isn't there a travel gnome or something?
Yes,
and you take pictures of you.
Or there's but see, she was like the person that even though she wasn't really a person, she was the one that knew where the best places to be was at.
How did she know that?
Well, she didn't know it. Lester knew it and took her to it.
So it was really this Lester kind of.
Yeah, but isn't
his
it?
ideas went through this mannequin and people bought into it.
It's so cool.
It's like a big con. Like that's the con game there.
Well, no, everyone knew she wasn't real.
Yeah, but they knew that she couldn't know if the soup at the fancy restaurant tastes good.
They have pictures of her at like the Opera House. They have pictures of her at all these famous restaurants, and like you really made it.
You know how devastated you would be.
Cynthia came to visit. You knew you were going to be in the like society.
Or how devastated you'll be if a mannequin gave you a poor review of your show, right? I mean, like, Cynthia
I don't think
was
she
there.
gave reviews.
I mean, could you imagine that? You get
Yeah,
this
but she
review.
didn't give
Cynthia hated it. 2 thumbs down. Like, I mean, that's.
No, they never. Never gave her that kind of power.
I got to get out of this business.
But then,
right? I mean,
I guess what happened was that she was even asked to lead the Easter parade on Fifth Avenue. Everything. But then one time at a beauty parlor, she slipped from her chair and shattered.
she slipped from the chair
and then shattered.
I think another mannequin was jealous and gave her a little shove, like, you know.
And but the guy, you would think, how do you think Lester reacted to her shattering?
It was devastated. He probably never.
You would have thought so, but he actually was relieved
because he didn't have to carry this 150-pound plaster of Paris thing around that everyone loved more than him.
He was quoted saying, "Cynthia has become a Frankenstein to me, and I was rather relieved that she decided to retire."
No, but he is the Frankenstein. That's the thing people always mess up, right?
Okay,
because Frankenstein, this Frankenstein's monster was the monster. Frankenstein was the scientist who made the monster.
Yeah, but they named it Frankenstein. So then,
who named it? It was the wasn't it the
people
Frankenstein's
started calling
monster?
Frankenstein's monster Frankenstein.
What people?
Whoever knew him
In the movie?
Whenever you see Frankenstein, when you see a picture of Frankenstein, like the bolts in the neck, the green guy, you call him Frankenstein. You don't call him Frankenstein's monster.
But it should be. He's Frankenstein's monster.
But he became known as that. So that's who his identity was.
I guess. I don't know.
Do you know what I'm saying?
But he's
just because it's not right.
But Lester's really the Frankenstein. He could have just changed it and said, I'm feeling like Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein.
No, but I think he kind of felt like...
Right, because he felt like the responsibility of Frankenstein's monster was Frankenstein. That's the whole thing, right?
Well, I guess, but he felt that Cynthia had some sort of, there was, like, he gave her more of a persona. Do you know what I mean? Right.
Yeah, so all this talk about Frankenstein has got me thinking about Reanimation and if folks really tried it, because Lester was just going around with his mannequin, but we had talked about the movie Mannequin, which had Kim Cattrall in it.
Yeah, but he wasn't trying to make her come to life. Although, it's interesting because I did more research. And they actually had a radio show, maybe even a TV show, and she was like the star of this radio show.
Right. So,
and he would say that she had laryngitis, and that's why she wasn't talking.
If she could make him.
So if she could become a star of a radio show, I mean, anybody can, right?
Well, that's why we're here doing this. So.
I guess in a way, he did bring her to life.
Bring her to life, right?
And he made her this personality.
Right. The idea of it all, kind of like the Frankenstein, where you brought this thing, and then he destroyed her too. I mean, when she was destroyed.
Well, he did not destroy her.
She slipped from the chair.
He wasn't sad.
So Frankenstein, so Lester Gaba, that was. Remind me, what era was that?
See, that's something I didn't mention before. Right. It was the 1930s.
Right.
So pre-World War II.
Right.
And the very glamorous time. If you think of like black and white noir films. That's what Cynthia was. Right.
Okay. Yeah. So, that's 1930s. Then Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was 1818. So I really was interested in if there was folks before that or after that. Like, did the fiction inspire the science, or did science inspire the fiction? because then we got 18, then you jump all the way up to Lester. So I kind of went down that rabbit hole, kind of thinking about it. And actually, there was as early as 1780 was some of the first kind of experiments or tries or ideas of this idea of reanimation. And it kind of goes from, strange to just outright weird. And so in 17,
No, I'm sorry.
yeah,
Does that mean you're trying to bring back somebody from the dead, or you're trying to create them from nothing?
yeah, I mean, it's more these experiments were and accidentally, it was bringing back someone who had died. So they were living, and then they died, and then it's like, can we reanimate them?
Like the pet cemetery.
Like Pet Cemetery, right? Except
Yeah.
you don't want to be buried in a pet cemetery.
You don't want to live your life again.
No, you don't. Yeah, so this Luigi Galvani, he kind of was the first to show that electrical signals could move freshly dissected frog legs. And so he was in his lab with his assistant, and I guess they were dissecting, they were skinning these frogs. I don't know.
Who has that job?
And so
Oof.
they went, and so they, back in this time, they were still studying anatomy, like how the body put together, just a physical form. And so they were doing it, and I guess a metal hook had touched the frog, and then the muscles in the frog leg started to twitch, and they described it like it was going to hop away. And so this got Luigi Galvani, thinking about that, and he actually described this as, he said that the muscles had a special vital fluid called animal electricity. And so he was like, this is a new type of electricity, animal electricity. So he published this paper, and like any scientific paper you publish, you're going to have dissenters, and that's science. You go back and forth with the exchange of ideas. And so Alessandro Volta, and that name Volta, there's an electric car.
That's where volt comes from?
And Volt, yeah. So this Alexander
Voltage?
Volta, he was
Does that-
credited with inventing the battery in the field of electrochemistry.
So that's where the word voltage
and that
comes
was in
from.
1782. He disagreed with Luigi, and he said that any electricity can provide a similar effect. And so then Volta, he started testing this idea that any electricity can work on all sorts of dead things. So you would just get dead things and start testing. But his claim to fame isn't trying to reanimate anything. It was actually for the battery. So he went a whole different direction because he kind of
But
got
then
bored
why
with
was
that.
he interested in dead things?
He was more interested in proving Luigi Galvani wrong, that any electricity could work. But during that study, he realized that he could create
It was
the
a
battery.
happy accident?
Right, yeah. He kind of got into this field, and then he stopped trying to reanimate things and actually did
Just try to
something more
power
useful.
up.
That's right, yeah. Portable energy, I guess, a battery, right? So Volta came on the scene, but Galvani was at kind of the end of his career, and so he really didn't. He was kind of wanted to retire, and so his nephew kind of is the one who took up the charge against Volta.
Get it? Charge?
And no pun intended, or maybe it was. And so this Giovanni Aldini, who was a nephew of Luigi Galvani, after this man was hanged, George Foster, and this George Foster was guilty. I think he drowned his wife and kids in a canal or something like that. But they hung him, and then they sent his body to the lab of Giovanni. And so Giovanni then, during this time in the 1780s, you would just have people come.
Like,
you're gonna,
like an audience.
Yeah,
Like, what is that called? That was called something specific. I can't think of the name.
Yeah, I don't know. You're right. There is something
was like
a viewing of the
it was a
autopsy
real
or
big
whatever.
thing,
Right,
yeah.
right. It was like you had nothing else to do, and people.
It was
weren't-
like the Netflix of the day.
right. Yeah, you didn't have a mannequin to go around with, so you would come watch these demonstrations of these autopsies and see what's inside of folks. And so he was doing this demonstration, and he soaped and salted the man's ears, and then connected them to electrodes. Kind of you can imagine. Kind of a la Frankenstein, right?
Or you know what
And
I'm picturing? Although she was a robot, not a person. But in Metropolis.
Oh, right.
With
Yeah,
electricity.
that's right. Yep. And
Yeah.
so, and then you had, So what happened is, as the currents passed through these electrodes, the man's face and mouth started to twitch. Right. And so we knew from the frog experiment that you pass electricity through,
That's so
you start
creepy.
going.
Can you imagine just going,
It's-
hey, let's go watch
That's
this
right. Let's go
thing?
check it
I
out.
was
So a
like, oh.
reporter was there, and this was the report. I'm noted. This is a quote. On the first application of the process to the face, the jaws of the deceased criminal began to quiver, and the adjoining muscles were horribly contorted, and one eye was actually opened. In a subsequent part of the process, the right hand was raised and clenched, and its legs and thighs were set in motion.
Oh my
And so, so you had this thing, and people freaked out. Like, they were freaked out. And actually, the government, that at the time, the government body, they actually took up the question that if George did come back to life, should he be hanged again? Right? Because if he comes back to life, he's still a criminal. And they voted to, yes, they should. If he came back to life, you should
that
hang him.
wouldn't be whatever that's called. You can't be tried twice.
Right. Yeah, no. They were like, you're a criminal, you get reanimated, it sucks for you. You're gonna get hung again, and we're gonna make it right this time.
Sounded like he might have deserved it.
So that was then. And so then you had another fellow, Andrew Urey. He actually also was experimenting on hanged convicts, and some believe maybe up to 300.
Oh my goodness.
And he would mostly do this just to draw the crowd. Like it was like a carnival act. Like it was like
was he an
sideshow.
actual scientist?
I mean, yeah, he actually was a scientist. And so he would do the same thing. He would get the crowd.
Would it be at like a carnival?
No, it was like just
in a medical school.
I mean, yeah, it's like more in his living room at some
in
point.
His
living room, yeah, like his parlor. Like he would have people
is in
over.
A parlor?
Like they would come over.
What
and,
year?
This would be the 1780s, 90s, in that ballpark. Yeah, and he would have people come over, and he would just make the body twitch to please the crowd, so they would yell out body parts,
like marionette.
Yeah, and he wasn't really answering any scientific questions. Like the people before him, they were actually trying to figure out what happens. Why does electricity, right? Make people, or would make these the body parts move and things like that. And we know now, like our body, we're controlled with electrical signals kind of effect. You to restart someone's heart, you give them a jolt of electricity.
Okay, so I have a question. So do you have to do this within a certain amount of time when they died? Like, you couldn't take... Oh, I mean, obviously, then they would decay and they wouldn't have the muscles.
Right.
So you have to do it
there
pretty...
was some time, right?
Pretty fast after
Yeah,
they
I mean,
died.
you got to still have fluid. You got to still have your body...
So within, like, days?
Probably, yeah. You probably could go and find someone and charge them up and then... make their muscles kind of twitch and things like that, just because it's all a physical interaction, right? So it's kind of, you can stimulate the muscle, and they're, kind of a little aside, getting off the little history bit here, but they're now experimenting with amputees and reconnecting, electrodes so that they can actually feel touch and things, because you can still send electrical signals and your brain interprets that as touch, right? So it's kind of this whole idea earlier on, but they were just, especially as Andrew Urey, he was just doing this for fun. So it was just a carnival show. And he really, once again, he freaked people out and to the point where, he was starting to get bored with it. Like it wasn't fun after the 290th person you do this to. It's kind of not as fun. And the church was getting involved, and they were threatening to shut him down because they were afraid that he was summoning devils. Like he's going to accidentally revive devils and cause like a zombie apocalypse, I guess.
And where was this? Like what country? Where was it? Do you know?
This was in Europe. I don't think the other two in Italy. I don't know. Was this England? I can't. I don't know. I would have to look that up. We'll put that in the show notes.
Is there evidence that Mary Shelley would have known about these?
Yeah, there's
shows?
a little bit. So, and I just want to follow up, and I'll touch on this Andrew Urey, because he actually, he actually gave this up, the reanimation efforts up. He concluded it was a waste of time, and he actually went on and he revolutionized the way volumes are measured. And he was also the first to describe, and some say invent, a bimetallic thermostat. So like how our thermostats work. Well, now they're digital, but the old ones. So he actually went on and did other stuff.
So he actually decided maybe I should stop screwing around with trying to make people dance around.
That's right, yeah.
And let me actually do some actual research.
He actually did notable things that we take advantage in our life. But yeah, and so you're asking about Mary Shelley. So around this time, you're right that we're in a time frame where she would have been there, and it is noted that her family they were well off, and they would have like kind of parties and things, and a lot of the intellectuals and particularly scientists would gather, and Mary, she would be very intrigued and listen to all these tales. So there is some evidence that she might have actually might have observed some of these things or things like that. So it feels like the science or the carnival of science. I don't know. This guy was just doing it for fun, but I think that inspired, potentially could have inspired Mary to the idea of reanimating someone. So yeah, then that takes us to like the 20s, and so we go from there to the 1920s. So it's kind of a little big jump of time, and this was Russia. A scientist, Sergei. I'm probably hack up this name and hear it from listeners. But Brokanako. Once again, we'll put all these names and some links in the reader notes, the show notes. But he was a scientist in Russia during the revolution, and he invented the autojector, or the heart-lung machine. And these heart-lung machines still exist. It was a sound design. And nothing about that. It was but it was the way he tested it that was kind of weird and creepy, and this reanimation kind of bent. And so during his experiments, he would actually, I apologize for animal lovers, but he would decapitate dogs and immediately connect them to his machine, and the machine would draw out their blood from their veins, arteries, and circulate it through a filter for oxygenation and refilter it back through. And so he did this, and he kept like the dog's severed head alive and responsive for over an hour and a half with this kind of, and really it was blood clots that
I think
that
we
killed
need to
the
add a
dog. So
warning in the beginning. That's just disgusting.
we can, yeah, no, we can say that. And I tried to give a little warning there. This was, this was science back then. Like now, you probably cannot do this. Like
I hope not.
As a scientist working in a lab, working with people who work with animals, like there is so many regulations. So coming through, like I'm gonna hook this dog's head up to some circulating machine, probably would raise a lot of red flags. So, and so then he went and he kept doing this, and actually he started trying this on humans. And there is the Soviet Congress of Science claim that he actually managed to reanimate a human in 1930. So we're right here matching up with Lester and his mannequins. He was given, so this Sergei, he was given this corpse of a man who had committed suicide. His team plugged the body up to the autojector. They kind of pushed like a concoction of chemicals that Sergei had made up that he thought would work to reanimate a human into the bloodstream. They kind of opened up his chest cavity, administered another mix of chemicals, and then they actually got the heart to start pumping. He got a steady rhythm, and then the man started to groan and to move. And that freaked everyone out in the kind of the scientists out, and they shut down the experiment, unplugged the man who then died for, a second time technically. And they kind of stopped and shut down that avenue of experimentation. So, it was kind of one of these weird, kind of things like that. So that's, I didn't really find much. I don't think people have been experimenting reanimation, past that level, and trying to get humans to come back. But still lives on in fiction. You mentioned Pet Cemetery, Weird Science. They created, that was more closer to the mannequin idea, where they took it and they created the woman on a computer. Remember? Mm-hmm. They did that. And just a quick, also, I mean, like we talk about all these folks, and they went into to actually do real science things in our everyday life. But we think about electrical stimulation. So Luigi Galvani's initial work is the basis for electrical muscle stimulation, also known as neuromuscular electrical stimulation. And this is kind of what you do is you elicit muscle contractions using electrical impulses. So you see a lot in like sports. They might talk about, during their recovery, they did a lot of electrical muscle stimulation. So you're kind of tricking the muscle that is still working, even though you're not putting like physical load on it. And so the muscle doesn't atrophy. So, I had my Achilles tendon torn and repaired. And, my procedures, I'm not a multi-million dollar athlete. They said sit around for 8 weeks, my calf muscle atrophied, and then I recovered that muscle mass in physical therapy. But athletes, they would actually get electrical stimulation and kind of keep that muscle active as they're healing and things like that. So it was really kind of fascinating that these folks, I mean, even though it was this kind of weird screwball, we're going to reanimate things and humans, but really there was a lot of practical science that came out of it, with the exception of Andrew Urey, who was just doing it for fun. But he did other stuff, like you said. So, it was really fascinating to kind of get there. And so this, history of reanimation in there. But,
Well, that was a pretty interesting hole that we tumbled down.
yeah, definitely. And there was no zombie apocalypses started by people trying to reanimate living things.
Yet.
Yeah, so I mean, and it's just a really interesting idea, even though people aren't, or at least we don't know. I mean, it could be in their living room trying this, but to bring back and reanimate life from death. But people are working to kind of give life to inanimate objects. Kind of thinking of AI, Ex Machina comes to mind as a movie, or any of the other. Terminator on the apocalyptic side of it all, where computers become sentient. It's just, people have that desire.
Or these virtual people, like you can get yourself a virtual friend online,
Right,
and they
right.
can talk to you and ask you questions so you're not lonely and stuff.
I mean, yeah,
That's kind of like that.
Kind of like that, and kind of like what Lester did, right? I mean, but,
Yeah, I mean, he brought Cynthia to life, and if anything, she outshone him.
Yeah, right.
And then he kind of wanted to get away from her.
Right.
But
she
he
fell
really,
off the chair, right?
Yeah,
That
he
was right, right.
she shattered.
Right.
But
right.
then I found out, also with more research.
Yeah.
I
A lot of
found out.
research here in this,
Yeah,
this
I know.
rabbit hole.
It's like a
research.
lot of just what should be doing, but no, I'm Googling about Lester
That's why,
Gaba.
yeah, and you get into these weird topics about people in their living room with electric probes in a crowd. So, that
And I
sounds
just
like
see a
something
scene
else.
in a movie that needs to be done. Like Guillermo del
Yeah,
Toro
right.
could just,
Yeah, there it is.
he could do that so well, like bring that back.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So,
But anyway,
Yeah.
he actually, I don't know how much time elapsed. He actually took the mold that he had
Right.
for Cynthia, and he actually created her
Recreate
again.
Right. Wow.
And then he tried again. I think because that was what his fame was so tied
Right.
to.
To that thing.
But then he had gone off to World War II, all this stuff.
Right.
And he,
Yeah,
of course, could never recreate
Yeah,
that.
It's always hard, that magic, that spark.
Right. He never
Maybe.
got it back.
Pun.
Well, but he did do other things.
You missed a pun there, the spark, right?
Yeah,
I tried to set myself up there.
yeah. I was trying to ignore that.
Yeah, no, but it's fascinating. Just the lengths we go to.
And then, I mean, he lived a long life. He lived till he was 80, but he died. He died without any relation. Died
right.
alone.
Right.
And I don't know what happened to Cynthia. No one knows.
Cynthia's gone. She's probably now.
But no, she could be in some storage room somewhere.
Or she could be Siri. She could be there. Like
No, she
answering
didn't
our
talk.
call and-
Remember, she had
Well,
laryngitis.
now she gets AI. Like she gets,
Yeah.
that's the new Mannequin Part 3. I think there was a Mannequin 2, I believe.
Oh
So
gosh, I
Mannequin
never
3
saw the
could
2
be-
and 3.
You could have Cynthia gets an iPhone embedded in her head or something, and then she becomes sentient.
Oh gosh, no,
But
no. We need to end this now.
yeah, I guess you're right. That's a rabbit hole for another episode.